Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how Metroid Prime 4 may very well end up being considered the most impressive game Nintendo ever put out on the Switch. Can this actually happen? I think so. And some recent details have come out that seem to be supporting this idea more so, but on top of that, I've seen some interviews from some Retro Studios devs in the past that said some things that I think are very illuminating on this overall situation, and when we also account for an interesting rumor that came about a little while back, I think it portrays a very compelling picture here, and that's what I would like to focus on today. But before going forward, I would like to ask that if you do enjoy my videos to please subscribe, and if you would like to see my content on a near daily basis, hit the notification bell. So let's first talk about this interesting update. So Dr.81, his channel and video will be linked in the description below. Really awesome at making these discoveries when it comes to job postings. He found something from another ex-Retro Studios dev that worked at Retro Studios for about 4 years, and what they detailed for their job duties suggests some pretty nice things for Metroid Prime 4. So one of their responsibilities entailed interactive environmental effects, working with rain, steam, lava, shot reactions, visor effects, etc. But then there's this next responsibility here where it says to collaborate across disciplines to make sure game world comes to life with details and flourishes, and in parentheticals, they say, I hope players notice. So here it sounds like there's a little bit more of a focus on immersion in the game and making the actual world feel like a living, breathing world, which is exciting to me and I think is a big part of what makes the Metroid Prime games special. But moving on, here they also say specialize in authoring energy-based visuals, holograms, force fields, projections, sci-fi glass, etc. This is par for the course for a Metroid game, so it's not too shocking. But then this next part here is what may be setting some minds at ease. Here it says, to optimize content to help our projects maintain 60 Hz on Nintendo hardware. And the games they have listed here are Metroid Prime Remastered, Switch, and Metroid Prime 4, Switch. So here's evidence that yes, they are still working on Metroid Prime 4 for the Nintendo Switch. And where they say to optimize content to help our projects maintain 60 Hz, that means doing what they can to make sure the games run at 60 frames per second, and here it says on Nintendo hardware. And that little part right there is also extra fascinating because they say Nintendo hardware and not specifically Switch in this one little description, which could perhaps hint at the possibility that they are also working on Switch too. But that's not the focus for today's video. The focus for today's video is how it's looking like Nintendo is putting something together here that will be maybe the most impressive game on Switch. And this job posting is suggesting that Metroid Prime 4 will be running at 60 frames per second. Now, something that should be noted here is that you could argue that the games that they were working on are Prime Remastered and Prime 4. We know Prime Remastered is already at 60 frames per second. Maybe they were just focusing on 60 FPS for that game, and this one responsibility doesn't necessarily have to do with Prime 4 on Switch, especially if there's also a Prime 4 version for Switch 2. You could argue that, but I do think this strengthens the notion that in general they're aiming for 60 frames per second across the board. And also, if you're having a remaster run at 60, but then the actual new game isn't, I don't think that's a good look. And I think it should also be said that the Metroid series in general is known for running at 60 frames per second. All of the Metroid Prime games, on prior consoles, GameCube and Wii, ran at 60 frames per second. Even Metroid Dread, a 2D game, runs at 60 frames per second. Of course, it's 2D, that's easier to accomplish, but the point is 60 FPS should be expected, even for Prime 4. Given the history of the series, and now with this job listing, it seems just a little bit more plausible. But 60 FPS alone would not make the game the most impressive there is on Switch. There's a lot more to factor here. So I was taking a look back at some interviews from about a year ago with Jack Matthews, the lead technical engineer on the Metroid Prime trilogy. These interviews come from Kiwi Talks, so their channel, their videos will be linked in the description below. But Jack Matthews had some very interesting things to say about Prime Remastered and Metroid Prime 4.
I think if they tried to go for 60 with big open world stuff, then that would be at the expense of the high detail, cool interiors. And so I almost hope they don't go for Metroid Breath of the Wild. I hope they go for like amazing, beautiful, dense geometry.
So here Jack Matthews is talking about some of his concerns regarding Metroid Prime 4. And full disclaimer, Jack Matthews actually thinks Retro Studios has done a great job. Still, a lot of the core talent from the prior games is there, and so they know how to make Metroid. And he thinks they're going to find a way to make this game very impressive, as Nintendo typically does with their games. But here he is expressing a concern that something is going to have to give. If they go for 60 frames per second and they go for the very detailed closed corridor environments, then they won't be able to have big open areas. But you see, what's interesting about what he's saying here is that there is a rumor that came from the Xbox Era podcast that we've covered before, where they've heard from someone who supposedly saw the game, so there's a few degrees of separation here, so again, rumor, take with a grain of salt. Some things may be lost in translation, it may not even be true, but what was said is that the game is visually unbelievable, but it also has big open areas. Now, big open areas doesn't necessarily mean open world, they could just be large vast areas, kind of like in Xenoblade. And here Jack Matthews is talking about how he doesn't want them to make Metroid Prime 4 like Breath of the Wild, fully open world. But that doesn't mean there can't be big open areas. However, if we're talking about a game that's visually unbelievable and has big open areas and is also running at 60 frames per second, you would think something might have to give.
They did it. Hats off to them for it, because it was something that I thought if it was going to hit 60 on Switch, there was no way they were going to do physically based rendering. I thought it was going to look like the Dolphin emulator on GameCube, like flat lighting, kind of last gen-y, but no, they nailed it.
So I just played another clip where there's an interview with Jack Matthews from Kiwi Talks, and here he's talking about how he did not think Metroid Prime Remastered would be able to have 60 frames per second while also having this physical-based rendering that they've done in Prime Remastered that's allowed it to look incredible, even in his own words where he said it's the best looking game on Switch. But Retro Studios was able to get that done. They were able to put together a game that looks arguably better than any other game on Switch while still running at 60 frames per second. But Prime Remastered doesn't have big and open areas. So will Prime 4 have it? Yes, we have that rumor, but let's remind ourselves it's a rumor. It may not turn out to be true. I'm personally inclined to think that with how long they've been working on this game, with the expectations of this game, with what we've seen from Prime Remastered, I think we should have enough reason for optimism here that they're going to put something together that's going to be very well polished and be pretty impressive. And from the signs we are seeing, it's likely going to be 60 FPS, and I would assume that they are still going to have the physical-based rendering that made Prime Remastered look so good. But I'm going to go a step further and assume that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be running on an even more updated, even more advanced engine, and they'll be able to bring even more out for the Switch. So I think Prime 4 is going to be an even more impressive game. Now, will it be more impressive because the effects we see are going to just be even more advanced and we'll see even better lighting and things of that nature? Or will it be more impressive because it will match the overall visual look of Prime Remastered at 60 FPS, but with bigger, larger areas? Or could it somehow be both? It feels like the Switch is going to explode running Metroid Prime 4 when considering these possibilities, but I definitely think when we get to see Prime 4, it's going to be considered something even better than Prime Remastered on Switch. Now, if they do manage to accomplish all of these things, would that then make Metroid Prime 4 the most impressive Switch game to date? Because there is this other game that I would say is also pretty impressive that was made from Nintendo that was in development for an extremely long time, and that's The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, obviously there's a little bit of a divide with the Zelda fanbase, but one thing that cannot be denied is just how technically impressive the game is. The game is a massive open world, even more massive than Breath of the Wild. You have the skies, the surface with now caves and more things going on there, and then the depths. And it can move seamlessly throughout all these different areas of the game, including the dungeons in the overworld, which is not something that could be done on Breath of the Wild. and everything is physics-based. There's a great deal of interactivity with almost everything in the world. It's extremely impressive. So maybe Metroid Prime 4 won't be as impressive of a technical achievement as Tears of the Kingdom. That remains to be seen. But something I feel somewhat confident in saying though is this. While Tears of the Kingdom may be the most technically impressive game on Switch currently, in terms of what we see visually, because there's so much going into the vast world and the seamless exploration and all the physics involved, not everything is devoted to the visuals and performance. Metroid Prime 4 may have more of a focus on visuals and performance, and just little cool effects that improve our immersion, as we saw in the job listing, as we saw in Prime Remastered, like with water dripping down Samus's arm cannon. These are things that are very Metroid that will help it stand out compared to other games, including Zelda. So what do you think? Will Metroid Prime 4 end up being considered the most impressive game on Switch? Or will those honors stick with Tears of the Kingdom? I'm curious what you have to say. Anyways everyone, this is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.